My parents emptied my college fund to buy my sister a luxury car. They laughed. Consider it a gift to the golden child. I just smiled and said, "You'll want to check your bank account." Their faces went pale when they found out what they mistakenly did. I, 24M, stood in the driveway staring at the metallic blue BMW convertible, its paint gleaming under the afternoon sun like some kind of monument to unfairness. My younger sister sat in the driver's seat, running her manicured nails along the leather steering wheel, squealing about how perfect everything was. My parents flanked either side of the car, beaming like they'd just cured cancer instead of enabling their 21-year-old daughter's sixth major life crisis this year. The smell of new car leather mixed with my mother's expensive perfume made my stomach turn. I'd driven here straight from my shift at the campus library, still wearing my work polo that had a coffee stain near the collar. The contrast wasn't lost on me. My father noticed me standing there and waved me over with that fake enthusiasm he'd perfected over the years. He asked what I thought of my sister's new car, his chest puffed out like he'd personally assembled it in the garage. I looked at the price tag still visible through the windshield and felt my throat tighten. $65,000. For someone who'd failed out of 2 colleges already and was currently taking a gap year to find herself. My mother chimed in about how my sister deserved something nice after all the stress she'd been under. The stress, apparently, consisted of breaking up with her boyfriend who wouldn't support her dream of becoming an influencer, and the exhausting process of deciding which European country to visit next month. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. I asked where they got the money for this. The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like dropping off a cliff. My father cleared his throat and said they'd made some adjustments to the family finances. Smart investments, he called it. Reallocating resources to where they were needed most. My mother nodded along, adding that some funds just weren't being used efficiently and it made sense to redirect them. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked them directly if they'd touched my college fund. The fund my grandmother had started when I was born, the one she'd contributed to until she died when I was 15. The fund I'd been carefully tracking, adding my own money from part-time jobs, planning every semester's expenses down to the textbook. My sister finally looked up from her phone, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not quite guilt, but awareness. She knew. My mother's expression hardened in that way it did whenever I questioned anything. She told me not to be dramatic, that the money was technically in their names as custodians, and they'd made an executive decision as parents. My father added that I was already most of the way through college anyway on scholarships and my part-time jobs, so I clearly didn't need it as much as my sister needed reliable transportation. Reliable transportation. For someone who lived at home and rarely left the house except to go shopping. I asked how much they'd taken. My father waved his hand dismissively and said they'd emptied it, but I should consider it a gift to the golden child. He actually laughed when he said it. My mother joined in, like they'd rehearsed this joke. My sister at least had the decency to look at her phone. $23,000. Gone. That was what remained of my grandmother's love, my own savings, my carefully constructed plan to finish my senior year without drowning in debt, and maybe even have enough left over for the first month's rent after graduation. I stood there doing calculations in my head. My scholarship covered tuition, but not housing, not food, not the medical insurance I had to maintain, not the professional clothes I needed for my internship, not the application fees for graduate programs. I'd been so careful, so deliberate. And they'd just erased it for a car that would probably get dented in a mall parking lot within the month. Something must have shown on my face because my mother's expression shifted to defensive. She told me I was being selfish, that family means helping each other out. My sister needed this car for job interviews, apparently. Never mind that she hadn't applied to a single job in 6 months. I felt something crack inside my chest, but my voice came out steady. I told them they'd want to check their bank account. Just that. Nothing else. My father frowned and asked what I meant, his voice taking on that warning tone he used when he thought I was being disrespectful. I repeated myself. I suggested they check their bank account very carefully. Look at what account they'd actually withdrawn from. My mother pulled out her phone, her manicured fingers suddenly moving with urgency. My father was already walking toward the house, his casual swagger replaced with quick, stiff steps. My sister asked what was happening, looking between all of us. I didn't answer. I just watched my mother's face drain of color as she stared at her phone screen. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between panic and disbelief. Here's the thing they didn't know, the thing I'd set up 6 months ago when I first noticed them making comments about my sister needing help and me being too independent. I'd moved my college fund. After turning 18, I'd spent weeks researching the legal process. My grandmother had structured it so that I could take full control at 18, and after some paperwork and a conversation with the bank's trust department, I'd moved every penny into an account in my name only. But I'd left the old account open with exactly $6,500 in it. Money I'd earned myself from a summer internship. Money I'd been planning to use for a used car of my own. I'd left it there as a test, a canary in a coal mine. And I'd moved my real college fund, all $23,000, into a high-yield savings account they had no access to whatsoever. What they'd actually emptied was their own joint savings account, the one with their emergency fund, the one with the money they'd been setting aside for their property taxes due next month, the one with the cushion they maintained for their own security. I'd known they had the passwords to my old account because my mother had helped me set it up years ago, and I'd bet on their arrogance, their assumption that I'd never think to protect myself from them. I'd even left the account statements in plain sight in my old room when I visited, just to make sure they knew where to look. My father came back outside holding his laptop, his face red. He demanded to know what I'd done. I told him I hadn't done anything. I'd simply moved my money to an account they couldn't access. What they'd withdrawn from was their own savings, thinking it was mine. They'd bought my sister a $65,000 car with their own retirement cushion. The explosion was immediate. My mother started yelling about deceit and manipulation. My father accused me of setting a trap. My sister just sat in her new car looking confused, asking if she had to give it back. I let them rage for a moment before I spoke again. I told them I'd set it up months ago because I'd heard them talking. I'd overheard my mother on the phone with her sister, laughing about how I wouldn't know what to do with all that money anyway, how my sister could use some help, how I was always so responsible that I'd figure things out. I'd heard my father agreeing that my scholarship proved I didn't need the full fund. So I protected myself, and they'd stolen from themselves. My mother tried a different approach, her voice going soft and manipulative. She said this was all a misunderstanding, that if I'd just given them access to my actual account, they wouldn't have made this mistake. They'd pay me back the $6,500, and we could all move forward as a family. I asked about my sister's car. Would she be returning it? Silence. My father said the dealership wouldn't take it back. They'd already signed the papers, and besides, my sister needed reliable transportation. The same circular logic, but now with desperation underneath it. I told them I wasn't interested in being paid back. That $6,500 was my gift to them, the same way they'd wanted to give my college fund as a gift to the golden child. I told them to consider it a lesson in checking their facts before making major financial decisions. My sister finally spoke up, asking if she really had to return the car. My mother told her no, sweetie, of course not. But I could see the math happening behind my mother's eyes. $65,000 on a car. Property taxes due in 4 weeks. Their emergency fund depleted. My father's face had gone from red to gray. I turned to leave, and my father grabbed my arm. He told me this wasn't over, that I'd betrayed their trust, that family doesn't do this to family. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. I told him he was right. Family doesn't do this to family. They shouldn't steal their son's inheritance to buy their daughter a luxury car. They shouldn't laugh about giving gifts to the golden child while the other one works 2 jobs to stay afloat. I pulled my arm free and told them one more thing before I left. The account they'd accessed had a transaction log. I'd been documenting everything, including the timestamps of their withdrawals, the conversations I'd overheard, all of it. If they wanted to make this legal, I had everything I needed. But I suspected they wouldn't want anyone looking too closely at their financial decisions. My mother started crying, asking how I could do this to them. I felt nothing watching her tears. I told her I'd learned from the best. The drive back to campus was the longest 40 minutes of my life. My hands shook on the steering wheel of my beat-up Honda. I kept expecting to feel guilty, to feel like I'd gone too far. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the way they'd laughed. Consider it a gift to the golden child. Like my grandmother's love, my hard work, my careful planning, all of it was just a resource to be reallocated to the child who mattered more. Update 1. I didn't expect this to blow up. I've been reading comments during my break at work, and I need to add what happened over the last week because it's gotten complicated. 3 days after the car incident, my uncle called me. My father's brother, someone I'd always gotten along with but wasn't particularly close to. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no, assuming my parents had recruited him to guilt-trip me, but something in his voice made me agree. We met at a coffee shop halfway between campus and my hometown. My uncle looked tired, older than I remembered. He told me my parents had called him asking for a loan. $40,000. They'd spun some story about an unexpected investment opportunity, but my uncle had pressed them, and eventually my mother had broken down and told him everything. Well, their version of everything. According to them, I'd stolen money from the family accounts and tricked them into buying my sister an expensive car they couldn't afford. I was a vindictive son who'd set an elaborate trap to humiliate them. My uncle had listened to all of this, then called my grandmother's estate attorney, the one who'd helped set up the original trust. It took him one phone call to get the real story. My uncle looked at me across the table and told me he wasn't giving them the money. He wanted me to know that, but he also wanted to hear my side directly. I told him everything. The years of obvious favoritism, the comments about me being so responsible I didn't need help, the overheard conversations, the decision to protect my inheritance. I showed him the documentation I'd kept, the timeline, the account statements. I even played him a voice recording I'd made on my phone months ago, just audio of my parents' voices carrying through the wall talking about how they could redirect my funds. My uncle sat back and rubbed his face. He told me my grandmother would have been proud of me for protecting her gift. Then he told me my grandmother would have been heartbroken by what my parents had become. Both things were true. He asked what I wanted to happen now. I told him the truth. I wanted nothing from them. I wanted to finish my degree in peace, start my career, and build a life where my value wasn't determined by how much attention I demanded or how much I cost. My uncle nodded and told me he was cutting my parents off financially. He'd been giving them small loans over the years, none of which had been repaid. He was done enabling them, and he wanted me to know that if I needed anything, actually needed it, I should call him. I thanked him, and we parted ways. I felt lighter somehow, knowing that at least one person in the family saw the situation clearly. 2 days after that, my sister showed up at my campus apartment. I almost didn't answer the door when I saw her through the peephole, but curiosity won out. She looked different. No makeup, hair in a ponytail, wearing actual normal clothes instead of her usual designer everything. She asked if we could talk. I let her in, but didn't offer her a seat. I just waited. She told me she hadn't known the full extent of what our parents were planning. She'd known they were dipping into some savings to help with the car, but she'd believed them when they said it was from their own account and they could afford it. When the truth came out, she'd realized how bad it was. She'd heard them on the phone with my uncle, heard my mother crying about property taxes and emergency funds. She'd seen the credit card bills they'd been hiding from each other. My sister told me she wanted to return the car. She'd gone to the dealership, but they'd explained the depreciation, the fact that they'd lose almost $15,000 the moment they tried to sell it back. She felt trapped. She felt guilty, and she was starting to realize that our parents had been using her as a weapon against me for years without her fully understanding it. I didn't soften. I asked her why she thought she deserved sympathy. She'd gone along with it, enjoyed being the golden child, never questioned why I was always working while she got handouts. She started crying and told me I was right. She'd been selfish and blind, and she was sorry. The thing is, I didn't want her apology. It felt too little, too late. But I also saw something genuine in her face, something that looked like actual self-awareness breaking through for the first time. I told her she should keep the car. She'd made her bed with our parents enabling, and now she could lie in it. But if she really wanted to change, she should get a job, start paying her own insurance, her own gas, stop letting them fund her influencer fantasies. She nodded and asked if we could ever have a relationship again, a real one. I told her honestly that I didn't know. Maybe someday. But right now, I needed distance from all of them. She left quietly. I watched her drive away in that ridiculous BMW and felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks now since everything exploded, and the fallout has been nuclear. My parents missed their property tax deadline. I know this because my father left me a voicemail, his voice shaking with rage, telling me that I destroyed their financial stability, that they might lose the house, that this was all my fault. I saved the voicemail, added it to my documentation folder. My mother tried a different approach. She sent me a long email about family, about forgiveness, about how parents make mistakes but children should honor them anyway. She reminded me of every sacrifice they'd ever made, every dollar they'd spent raising me, every time they'd driven me to soccer practice or paid for school supplies. She ended it by saying that if I had any decency, I'd give them the money to cover their tax bill. I replied with one sentence. I learned about conditional love from experts. My scholarship advisor called me in for a meeting. Apparently, my parents had contacted the university claiming I'd committed financial fraud and requesting that my scholarships be reviewed. The advisor, bless her, had looked into it thoroughly and found nothing wrong. She told me confidentially that she'd dealt with situations like this before, parents who resented their children's independence. She advised me to document everything and consider a restraining order if the harassment escalated. The harassment did escalate, but not from my parents directly. They'd started a whisper campaign with extended family. Cousins I barely knew started sending me messages about respecting my elders and not being vindictive. My mother's sister called me selfish. My father's mother, who'd never liked me much anyway, posted vague things on social media about ungrateful children. But something unexpected happened. My uncle, the one who'd met me for coffee, started pushing back. He made it clear in family group chats that he knew the full story and that my parents had lied to everyone. He posted screenshots of their loan requests, their inconsistent stories. Other family members started asking questions. My father's younger sister reached out to me privately. She told me something I'd never known. My parents had done something similar to her years ago. They'd borrowed money for a business venture that failed, then tried to make her feel guilty for asking to be repaid. She'd eventually written off the loss just to keep the peace. She told me she wished she'd had my courage to stand up to them. The family began splitting. Some sided with my parents, believing their version of events or simply valuing family harmony over truth. Others saw through it. The divide grew ugly, with holiday plans canceled and decades-old relationships fracturing. Through it all, I focused on my classes, my internship, my future. I worked my shifts at the library. I applied to graduate programs. I lived my life. My sister texted me occasionally. She'd gotten a part-time job at a retail store, apparently. She was paying her own car insurance now. She'd also started seeing a therapist to work through the family dynamics she was finally recognizing as toxic. I responded politely, but maintained distance. Last week, something shifted. My mother showed up at my apartment at 7 in the morning. I opened the door to find her looking haggard, 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. She told me they were going to lose the house. The property tax lien had gone through, and they had 90 days to pay or face foreclosure. My father had maxed out their credit cards trying to cover other bills. They'd borrowed from everyone who would lend. They were drowning. She begged. She actually got on her knees in my doorway and begged me to help them. She said she was sorry, that she'd been wrong, that she'd failed me as a mother. She promised things would be different, that they'd pay me back, that we could be a real family. I looked down at her and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a cold emptiness where love used to be. I told her to get up, that her theatrics wouldn't work on me anymore. I told her they had options: sell the car, downsize the house, declare bankruptcy if necessary. But they wouldn't get a penny from me. She stood up, and I watched the mask slip back into place. The tears dried up instantly. Her voice went cold and hard. She told me I'd regret this, that family was all anyone had in this world, and I was burning bridges I'd never be able to rebuild. I closed the door while she was still talking. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret letting them face the consequences of their choices. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt, in that deep way where you mourn not for what was, but for what never really existed in the first place. My grandmother's money is safe. It's funding my last semester, my graduate school applications, my future. It's doing exactly what she wanted it to do. And sometimes, late at night, I talk to her picture on my desk and thank her for loving me enough to protect me, even after she was gone. The golden child has her car. My parents have their consequences. And I have my freedom. That's the trade I made, and I'd make it again. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real-life-based stories. Thanks in advance.